The auctioneer asked me not to touch the glass case. Inside lay my silver star, medic's badge, and the bent compass that guided 6 wounded men home. My son stood beside his fiancée beneath their honeymoon banner, smiling as if my past belonged to him. Then the auctioneer turned over the display card and went pale. "Mr. Hale?" she whispered. "The seller says the owner died. But this silver star was concealed from us. And your old unit still calls its owner Doc." Across the ballroom, my son realized she had not called security. She had called my old unit, and one of the men behind my medal had answered, "If your child sold the one thing you could never replace, would you confront him or wait for witnesses? Tell me below." And subscribe for stories about quiet people who choose dignity over revenge. 3 weeks earlier, I still believed the empty space in my cedar box was a mistake. After my wife, Ruth, died, the mornings became precise. I woke before sunrise in our small brick house outside Dayton, put water on for coffee, and set out 2 mugs before remembering that one of them had not been used in 4 years. I never threw her mug away. It was cream-colored, with a blue line around the rim and a hairline crack beside the handle. Ruth said the crack gave it character. I said it leaked. She said that was because I filled everything too full. I was 68 and repaired mobility equipment at a veterans rehabilitation center. Most called me Walter. A few older men called me Doc. I had been an Army medic. But the rest were entitled to meet the man I had become. Not the worst day he survived. My right hand shook when tired. 2 fingers lacked sensation. And my knee carried old metal. None of it stopped me from repairing wheelchairs. My son, Evan, called that work tinkering. He was 34. Handsome in the polished way I had never been. With Ruth's brown eyes, he sold luxury kitchens and could make granite sound like a moral necessity. For years, I mistook that charm for confidence. Evan had been 11 when I left the Army. I missed birthdays and school concerts, then spent years trying to repay time as if it were a debt. I fixed every car he owned, covered rent when a business idea failed, and answered every midnight call. Evan learned that I would always arrive. Mara was an occupational therapist who knelt when speaking to children in wheelchairs. Ruth would have liked her. I did too, which made everything harder. The first time Mara came to my house, she noticed the cedar box on the bookcase. Ruth's father made it before Evan was born. The lid bore a scratch from Evan's toy truck. Inside were my medals, a field compass, 3 letters, and a photograph of 7 exhausted soldiers. I rarely opened it. Mara did not ask what the medals were worth. She asked why the compass was bent. It stopped a piece of metal. I told her. Evan laughed from the kitchen. Dad's version of a bedtime story. I closed the lid. 3 details from that evening stayed with me. Mara touched the scratch on the lid as if it mattered. Evan photographed the silver star when he thought I was pouring coffee. And before they left, he asked whether my homeowner's insurance listed collectibles individually. I answered without suspicion. No, they aren't collectibles. He shrugged. Everything is a collectible if somebody will pay enough. At the time, I thought he was making conversation. Their wedding was planned for early autumn at a vineyard north of Cincinnati. Mara wanted something small. Evan wanted something memorable. One Sunday, they brought brochures for a 12-day honeymoon in the South Pacific. It is more than we planned, Mara admitted. Evan turned the brochure toward me, but not by much. He asked whether I could add $15,000 to the wedding gift I had already promised. I could not add that amount without touching money reserved for taxes and medical costs. I offered $2,000 more and suggested a shorter trip. You have a paid-off house, he said. You barely spend anything. The house is not cash. Mara put down her fork. Evan, stop. He did stop, but only because she had seen him. His expression changed at once. He smiled, reached for my shoulder, and said he had been joking. His fingers squeezed hard enough to hurt. 2 days later, he blamed wedding pressure and apologized. I wanted to believe him. The following Saturday, He came over while I was at the rehabilitation center. He still had the spare key I had given him after Ruth died. He said he needed my ladder to hang lights at Mara's apartment. When I returned, the ladder was gone and the back door was locked. Nothing looked disturbed. On the kitchen counter sat Ruth's mug, washed and turned upside down. I had left it beside the coffee maker. I remember standing there longer than the detail deserved. That evening, Evan returned the ladder. He carried it into the garage and talked quickly about airline prices. When I asked whether he had moved Ruth's mug, he laughed. "Dad, you forget things." The words were gentle. That was what made them sharp. When the person applying pressure is your child, training becomes inconvenient. Love argues with observation. So I said nothing. The next week, Evan invited me to a charity preview at the Grand Harrington Hotel. His company had donated a kitchen renovation to a military family, and he said the event planner wanted family members present. "Wear a jacket," he told me. "Something decent." I almost declined. Crowded rooms made my knee ache. And ceremonies about service often turned real lives into clean little speeches. Then Mara called separately. "Please come," she said. "Evan has been strange about money. I think having you there might settle him." Her voice contained something she had not said. I agreed. After the call, the insurance question, Ruth's mug, and an old medic's instinct drew me to the bookcase. The cedar box felt lighter before I opened it. Inside were the photograph and Ruth's cotton cloth, the medals, the letters, and the bent compass were gone. I called Evan once. He did not answer. I called again and left no message. Then I sat at the kitchen table with the open cedar box in front of me and resisted the urge to drive to his apartment. Anger can feel like certainty, but it is often only speed. I had taught young medics to slow their hands when blood made everyone else hurry. That lesson still applied. The house showed no forced entry, only Evan, my traveling neighbor, and I had keys. My backdoor camera had stopped recording the month before. The objects had been removed carefully. Whoever took them knew what mattered and what could be left to hide the loss. At last, Evan called back. "What's wrong?" I told him the contents of the box were missing. There was a pause. Not long enough to prove anything, but long enough for him to choose his voice. "Did you move them?" "I did not." "You sure?" "Absolutely." He exhaled loudly. "Dad, you have been misplacing things lately." "Name one." Another pause. "The mug." "Your truck keys last month." I had found the keys in my coat. Evan was arranging ordinary moments into a story about me. I asked whether he had opened the cedar box when he borrowed the ladder. His answer came too fast. "Of course not." I didn't say it happened Saturday. Silence expanded between us. Then he became offended. "Are you accusing me?" "I'm asking a question." "Same thing with you." He hung up. 10 minutes later, Mara called. Her voice was tight. "Evan says you think he stole something." I described what was missing. She whispered, "The medals and the compass, 3 letters. He told me you gave him a family keepsake to sell." My hand tightened around the telephone. "What keepsake?" He would not say. He said it was private between you. I looked at Ruth's cloth inside the empty box. There was no agreement. Mara asked to call me back, then ended the conversation. The theft was not only about money. To me, Evan suggested age weakened my memory. To Mara, he claimed I approved the sale. He was managing witnesses. I drove to his apartment anyway. Mara opened the door. Evan stood behind her holding whiskey before noon. "You should have called," he said. "I did." Mara stepped aside, but he kept one hand against the doorframe. The gesture was casual enough to deny and clear enough to understand. "Tell him," Mara said. Evan looked at her, then at me. "I sold a few things." The sentence entered the room without shame. "You took them from my house." I had a key. A key is permission to enter, not empty a box. He rolled his eyes. They sat in the dark. "You never wore them." "Where are they?" "With a broker." "Nama." I do not know his legal name. Mara stared at him. You said it was a licensed estate dealer. It is. Then you know his name. Evan's anger turned toward her. Whose side are you on? She flinched. And I saw it. Not fear of a raised hand. Fear of consequences she had learned to predict. From smaller signs, I lowered my voice. How much? He drank before answering. Enough to finish the honeymoon. How much did he give you? An advance. How much? 6,000. The Silver Star could not legally be sold. More important, it was never a commodity to me. It held names, wounds, and a promise to a dying man. I asked for the broker's contact information. Evan refused. You will ruin everything. He said, you already sold property that was not yours. Mara said, give him the name. Evan turned on her. The deposits are non-refundable. If he gets the stuff back, we lose the trip. Then we lose the trip. His face changed. Charm did not disappear, it withdrew. What remained beneath it was calculation. Mara looked at me. I did not know. I believed her. Truth sometimes begins by admitting where knowledge ended. Evan walked to a desk and pulled a printed page from a drawer. He held it up without letting me take it. At the top was the logo of Blackwell Heritage Auctions. Beneath it appeared a lot description for a military service grouping from the estate of an unnamed dead medic. The photograph showed the compass, letters, badge, and citation. But the Silver Star itself was cropped from view. The preview was scheduled for the charity event Evan had invited me to attend. He had not invited me because his company wanted family there. He had invited me because he believed seeing the money and the applause would make me consent after the fact. The auction house has already advertised it. He said, if you make a scene, you will look confused. I have the authorization forms. Signed by whom? He folded the page. You signed plenty of papers when Mom died. For one terrible second, I understood the deeper edge of his plan. Ruth's death had required insurance forms, bank forms, beneficiary forms, and medical releases. Evan had helped organize them when grief made whole days indistinct. He was implying that somewhere among those pages lay my consent. Mara asked to see the authorization. He told her it was none of her business. She removed her engagement ring and set it on the desk, not as a final decision. Not yet. But as a warning, if our honeymoon was bought with something stolen, she said, it is my business. Evan looked at the ring, then smiled at her as if calming a child. You are tired. I knew that sentence too. I told him he had until evening to send me the broker's name and every document he had signed. Otherwise, I would contact the auction house and the police. He stepped close enough that I smelled whiskey. No one is going to believe a forgetful old man over his son. That was the first boundary he crossed in front of both of us. The second came as I turned to leave. He said, maybe it is time somebody handled your affairs before you lose something that matters. Mara inhaled sharply. I left without answering because rage would have given him the scene he wanted. In my truck, I recorded his exact words. The time and the witnesses. Old training was not authority. It was a habit of preserving what fear tried to blur. Blackwell Heritage Auctions occupied a restored train depot. Its charity preview supported travel grants for wounded veterans' families, making the theft uglier. I called Celia Grant, the auctioneer responsible for military lots, and identified myself as the living owner. She became careful. The consignor declared a badge, letters, and personal effects. She said, no Silver Star was disclosed. The metal is inside the collection. Then the lot is frozen now. I'll still need evidence that the other property is yours. I sent her family photographs, the original award citation, and the police report I filed that afternoon. The desk officer recorded the missing property, Evan's access, Mara's statement, and the listing. Ownership and the documents would need verification. Celia called back near sunset. Compliance confirmed the Silver Star cannot be offered. She said, but there is a second complication. The paperwork included a notarized property transfer bearing my signature. It stated that I had gifted the collection to Evan the year after Ruth died. Attached was a letter claiming I wanted the object sold anonymously because public attention aggravated a service-related condition. The language was plausible. It was also false. I asked for the date of the notarization. Celia gave me a day in late May. 3 years earlier, on that date, I had been in surgery at the Dayton Veterans Medical Center for a knee infection. Evan had visited, bringing a stack of forms, he said, concerned temporary access to my utility accounts and home insurance. I remembered signing 2 releases after the nurse told me the medication might make me drowsy. I had not signed a gift transfer. Celia said the notary seal initially appeared valid. She would preserve the file and notify counsel. Then she asked about the letters. The sale inventory included 4, not 3. Describe the 4th. I said. She hesitated. It is addressed to you as Doc. The writer says he has kept his promise and named his first son after the man who carried him. I sat down. The letter was from Daniel Mercer. During an attack overseas, Daniel suffered a chest wound. I treated him behind a broken wall, then helped move him and 5 others through a drainage channel. Metal struck my compass and bent its casing. Daniel survived. Peter Rowe did not. The citation omitted my fear and Peter asking me to tell his mother he had not been alone. Daniel wrote after he came home. His 4th letter arrived shortly after Ruth died. I had never placed it in the cedar box. I kept it inside a medical handbook in my bedroom. Someone had searched beyond the box. That changed the meaning of the theft. Evan had not acted impulsively after spotting valuables. He had opened drawers, books, and files. He selected a letter that increased the collection's emotional and financial appeal. He was building a marketable story. The handbook remained. But the letter, service copy, and reunion programs were gone. Nothing else was missing. I called Mara. She answered from her car. Evan had told her the argument was over and that I had agreed to let the auction continue. When she questioned him, he accused me of manipulating her because I could not tolerate losing influence over his life. Where are you now? I asked. Hospital parking garage. Are you safe? She did not answer immediately. Then she said, he has never hit me. It was not the question I had asked. I told her she could come to my house, to a friend, or to any place where she felt able to think. I did not tell her to end the engagement. A person being controlled often hears orders from both sides until every road feels owned by someone else. She said she needed time. Before hanging up, she told me something Evan had not intended me to know. He had met the broker months before their engagement. During a kitchen installation at the home of a collector named Preston Voss, Evan had once joked that Voss could put a price on anything, including a dead man's reputation. I wrote down the name. The next morning, auction counsel contacted me. The notary on the transfer was Leonard Pike, a former subcontractor who had worked with Evan's company. His commission had expired several months after the stated signing date. That did not prove the notarization false when made, but it established a connection Evan had concealed. I found a second connection in my bank records. On the week of my surgery, Evan had used the temporary authority I gave him to pay household bills. 2 days after my discharge, he reimbursed Leonard Pike for document services from his own account. According to a screenshot Mara found in their shared wedding folder, the screenshot was not enough by itself. It could have referred to legitimate work, but it gave investigators a direction. The third connection came from rehabilitation center footage. 6 weeks earlier, Evan entered while I worked in another wing and left with a flat brown envelope matching the one that held my service copies. It was not proof of every item, but evidence forms a bridge one plank at a time. That evening, Celia called with a new concern. Preston Voss admitted he planned to remove the Silver Star before public bidding and deliver it separately to a private buyer. He demanded the remaining lot be released. More troubling, the catalog description now claimed I was mentally incapable of managing historic property. The statement cited my son as caregiver. Evan had never been my caregiver. He was preparing to make my objection look like evidence for his claim. I stood beside the empty cedar box and understood why he had moved Ruth's mug. It was not carelessness. It was rehearsal. He had been testing whether I would doubt my own memory over something small before he asked strangers to doubt it over something large. The missing medals were no longer the greatest danger. My son was trying to sell the right to define whether my own mind still belonged to me. Evan was still my son. A public accusation would divide our family and destroy the future I had spent years helping him build. That night I took Ruth's mug to the porch. The crack had widened. Coffee gathered along the blue line and wet my thumb. Ruth understood Evan better. In college, he copied a classmate's proposal. The school spared him after a hearing, and Ruth asked me to wait. He is terrified of being ordinary, she said. If you corner him, he will defend the lie before he protects himself. He attended counseling twice, then appeared to move forward. I accepted appearance because I wanted peace. After Ruth died, I found a note she never sent Walter. Helping him escape every consequence is not the same as helping him become a man. I kept it in my wallet. Still, I questioned myself. Maybe medication clouded my memory. Maybe after Ruth's funeral, I said everything would someday be his. Grief makes promises the living may not remember, so I asked to be tested. Dr. Elaine Foster arranged an independent evaluation. It found normal age-related changes and no impairment affecting judgment or property management. The evaluation did not prove a forgery. It removed one weapon from Evan's hand. Donna Ruiz, an attorney volunteering at the center, requested preservation of auction records, notary journals, footage, and communications. Do not contact the notary yourself, she warned. I was not planning to. She looked at my notebook. You were planning something. I was planning to ask him what he remembered. That is contacting him. I accepted the correction. I was not an investigator. My role was to preserve what I possessed and let the proper people test it. Mara came to my house the following afternoon. She had packed one overnight bag. A bruise colored her forearm. I looked at it, then at hair. He grabbed me when I reached for his laptop. She said. He apologized before he let go. I asked whether she wanted medical care, police, or simply a locked door. In time, she chose the locked door first. We sat at the kitchen table. She opened her laptop and showed me the shared wedding account. The $6,000 auction advance had been deposited, then combined with money from her savings. Evan had paid the honeymoon balance without her approval by using a saved authorization token attached to her account. That made her a victim of more than a lie. She cried while changing her password, contacting the bank, and listing unauthorized transactions. Her hands shook. Her decisions did not. Then she found an email chain. Preston Voss had told Evan the collection would fetch more if it came with a clean estate narrative. Evan replied that the owner was effectively gone and that any objection could be managed through an incapacity petition after the wedding. Voss asked whether the fiancé knew. Evan wrote, "She knows what I tell her." Mara read that sentence twice. She did not remove the engagement ring. It was already absent. The emails revealed why Evan wanted me at the gala. If I stayed calm, Voss would claim I blessed the sale. If I objected, Evan would call me unstable. Either reaction had been assigned a meaning. That was the trap. Dana informed the detective. Celia kept the gala scheduled while freezing all bidding and transfer, so evidence would not disappear. I did not like using the event as a place where Evan might expose himself. Dana reminded me that no one was forcing him to lie. He can still tell the truth before he walks into that ballroom, she said. I wanted to give him that chance. I called and asked him to meet me at a diner near the highway. He arrived 20 minutes late and wore the expression of a man granting mercy. I placed no evidence on the table. I simply said, "Return everything. Correct the lie. We will deal privately with whatever remains." He stirred sugar into coffee he did not drink. "Mara is at your house." It was not a question. She is safe. You turned her against me. Your email did that. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Then he recovered. She had no right to open my messages. The thread was in a shared account about shared money. He leaned forward. You think this is about medals? It is about whether I spend the rest of my life apologizing for being your disappointing son. The word struck the oldest weak place in me. I asked whether I had ever called him disappointing. You did not have to. Everyone knew what you were. Brave Walter. Honorable Walter. Men you barely knew. Sent Christmas cards for 30 years. I could sell 1,000,000 kitchens and still be the kid standing beside your medal. There it was not an excuse, but a wound he had chosen to make into permission. I told him I was sorry. My silence had felt like judgment. I told him I should have spoken more honestly about fear, failure, and the cost behind the citation. Then I said, but your pain does not own my property, Mara's money, or my mind. His chair scraped back. At the gala, he said, people will see a confused old man harassing his son. Voss has a doctor's letter. I knew he had no legitimate letter from Dr. Foster. I did not challenge him. Which doctor? He smiled. You will find out. He left believing he had frightened me. Instead, he had confirmed that the incapacity narrative had moved beyond catalog language into manufactured medical evidence. Silence had protected him long enough. I called Dana and said I would attend the gala not to reclaim my reputation with a speech, but to make sure every person being used in the fraud could choose what to do after hearing the truth. The day before the gala, Evan returned to my house with Leonard Pike. My door camera was recording again, with a sign disclosing audio and video. Evan saw it, so every sentence he used was polished enough to deny later. Pike carried a leather folder, and the nervous politeness of a man practiced at sounding harmless. I spoke through the locked door. What do you want? Evan held up a document. A family solution. Dana had told me not to invite them inside. My neighbor knew to call for help if voices rose. Evan said the paper would let him manage my property until a medical review. In exchange, he would remove the catalog claim. You wrote the condition into the catalog. I said, Voss did. Based on whose claim? Pike looked toward the driveway. Evan lowered his voice. Sign today. Sit quietly tomorrow. And after the wedding, I'll help with the house and bills. You can stay as long as you need. My house was already in a trust. I was trustee. Evan was only a future beneficiary. But he had never read the full plan. I did not reveal that. In Mara, I asked. He smiled. She will come home when she realizes the wedding is happening with or without her tantrum. That sentence ended any remaining illusion that the honeymoon mattered more to him than control. I asked about the doctor's letter. Evan smiled. It only says a review may be appropriate. Sign this. And nobody has to question anything. Pike opened the folder to show me the transfer page. A second document slid partly free. Across its top were the words petition for emergency guardianship. Pike caught it first. What is this? Evan pulled the folder toward himself. A backup, Voss prepared. You told me this was a corrected gift transfer. It is all part of the same solution. Pike read 2 more lines, then looked at me. The petition claimed I wandered from home, missed medical appointments, and could not identify my own property. None of it was true. My seal is attached to this exhibit. Pike said. Evan's patience cracked. Because without your seal, the auction house listens to him. Tomorrow gives us the record we need. If he objects, he proves he is unstable. If he stays quiet, he proves he consented. That was all he admitted. It was enough to reveal the trap, but not enough to prove how the signature, the doctor's letter, and Voss's payment connected. I felt Ruth's absence like a pressure change. Your mother would be ashamed. I said. It was the one cruel sentence I allowed myself. Evan's face hardened. Mom spent her life translating you for everybody. She would be relieved. Then Pike did something unexpected. He placed the leather folder on my porch. I did not agree to an incapacity petition. He said. Evan swore at him. Pike backed away. You said your father consented and needed a lost document reconstructed. You did not say you were using my seal to call him incompetent. You took the money for a notary service, not this. Pike was not innocent. But fear fractured their partnership. Evan kicked the folder off the porch. Papers slid across the walkway. Enjoy the show tomorrow. He said to me, no one from your glory days is coming to save you. He drove away without Pike. I did not touch the papers until the detective arrived. The folder held Pike's transfer drafts, his notary journal copy, and the guardianship petition bearing his seal. It did not contain the medical letter, Voss's invoices, or a complete plan. The detective documented the porch, collected the folder, and obtained the full camera recording. Pike agreed to surrender his original journal and give a statement through counsel. Cooperation would not erase his actions. That night, Mara received a message from Evan claiming he had canceled the wedding. The vineyard soon told her he had kept the reception active and replaced her contact information with his. He had emailed guests that Mara was suffering a breakdown because I had manipulated her, but promised the celebration would continue once she calmed down. He was using the wedding to isolate her and control the public story. Mara withdrew her consent in writing, contacted guests herself, froze the shared account, filed a fraud report, and arranged to stay with her sister. Each action was hers. I did not tell her what to say to Evan. I only sat beside her while she drafted the message that ended the engagement. She did not send it yet. I want him to hear it where he cannot rewrite what happened, she said. The gala became that room. Celia arranged for auction counsel, the detective, a hospital representative, and the charity chair to attend. Dana brought my trust and award citation. Dr. Foster supplied a sworn statement. Mara then found a draft budget in the wedding accounts cloud archive. It listed the auction advance, her savings, and my house beneath the words Phase 2. Voss's invoice and the false medical letter arrived separately through the auction house's preserved email server. No single folder held the whole scheme. The sources confirmed one another. One final question remained. The fourth letter mentioned Daniel Mercer, but the auction house could not confirm that the writer and the wounded soldier were the same person. Celia asked whether I had contact information for him. I did not. We had not spoken in nearly 9 years. His last letter came from Arizona. I had heard through another veteran that he later moved east to be near his son. Celia studied the names engraved on the back of my medal case and the unit information in the citation. My father served in the same battalion years later. She said, there is an association roster. May I call them? I said yes, but asked her not to summon anyone as a weapon against my son. I only need the record confirmed. She nodded. At noon, she called the association. By evening, 3 old telephones were ringing across 3 states, and somewhere, a man named Daniel Mercer learned that the medic who carried him out of a drainage channel had been declared dead by his own son. The Grand Harrington ballroom made money look tasteful. Soft gold light fell across white tablecloths. A quartet played near objects labeled with other people's wars. My collection remained in glass near the stage. The card read, property of a deceased army medic. I stood nearby. Alive. Mara entered beside her sister, wearing no ring. Evan arrived with Voss. Seeing us, he looked satisfied. As if our presence proved he still controlled the evening, he approached Mara first. We can fix this, he said. You canceled the wedding. I was angry. You did not cancel it. His smile tightened. Not here. Here is exactly where you wanted every lie to become public. Voss stepped between them and expressed sympathy for my confusion. The ownership dispute is being handled, he said. By whom? The family and appropriate medical advisors. Name one medical advisor who examined me. He looked toward Evan. Celia Grant approached before either man answered. Mr. Voss, she said. The lot remains frozen. You were notified not to represent otherwise. Voss smiled at the growing circle of listeners. This is a private disagreement between a father and son. Celia's expression did not change. It became an auction compliance matter when a living owner was represented as dead. The quartet stopped. The silence traveled farther than a shout. Evan stepped close to me. "You are embarrassing yourself." "Then let the documents speak." Auction counsel led us into a side salon with the detective. Dana, Mara, Celia, Vos, and Evan. This was not a courtroom. Its purpose was to decide whether Blackwell had received fraudulent property and should withdraw the lot. Celia displayed Evan's transfer beside verified samples of my signature. A document examiner found that the disputed signature copied even a small defect from my hospital release. Real signatures vary. Copies repeat their accidents. Evan said I had signed both documents together. Hospital logs showed Pike never entered my floor. His certificate claimed I appeared across town while records proved I was under observation. Voss said he relied on the notary. The detective said Pike had admitted he never witnessed my signature and that Evan supplied the copy. Evan's face lost color. "He is lying to save himself." "That is possible," the detective said, "which is why his statement is not standing alone." Celia showed the preserved emails. Voss requested a clean estate narrative. Evan called me effectively gone, and both discussed using incapacity to neutralize me. Mara opened her laptop. "Then give them context." She displayed records showing Voss's advance and Evan's unauthorized transfer from her savings. The bank had opened a fraud review. Evan turned toward her. "You knew we needed the money. I knew we needed to change our plans. I did not know you intended to finance them by stealing from your father and using my account. We are getting married in 6 weeks. It is our money." "No," she said. "We were getting married. And it was not your decision alone." Voss attempted to leave. The detective ordered no arrest but required records preserved. Blackwell terminated Voss's vendor access and referred the matter to licensing authorities. Voss stayed. Next came the false medical letter. Dr. Foster confirmed I had no diminished capacity diagnosis. The other physician had never met me, and Voss had paid him days before his letter appeared. Evan looked at me and shook his head with practiced sadness. "You coached everyone," he said. "This is what he does. He builds a mission and makes people follow." "I'm sorry you lived beneath a story I never explained." I said, "I'm not sorry I stopped you from selling it." He pointed toward the display outside. "Those medals ruined my childhood. Every room had to know what you did. Every mistake I made got measured against St. Walter." Mara answered before I could. "Your father kept them in a closed box?" Evan looked at her as if she had broken a rule. She continued, "You were the one who photographed them. You found the broker. You wrote the dead owner story. You turned his silence into your excuse." Then she took an envelope from her bag. It confirmed that she had withdrawn from the wedding, frozen shared funds, and separated her accounts. She placed the engagement ring on top. "I'm ending the engagement," she said. "Not because Walter told me to. He never did. I'm ending it because when you believed no one could stop you, you told the truth about how you see both of us." That was the action no one could take for her. Evan stared at the ring. The detective said the evidence would be referred for theft, forgery, fraud, and unauthorized transactions. There was no theatrical arrest, but the auction house's decision could happen there. Celia led us back into the ballroom. She stepped to the microphone and announced that the military lot had been withdrawn. Its owner was alive. The transfer signature had been copied from a hospital form. The notary had not witnessed it. And the medical claim used to silence my objection came from a physician who had never examined me. The Silver Star had also been concealed from Blackwell's compliance review and promised in an unlawful private transfer. She apologized to the charity, its donors, and me. Then she turned toward the glass case. "There is another correction," she said. "The collection was described as memorabilia from an unnamed medic. His name is Walter Hale. I wanted it returned." Celia continued, "Because the association call had confirmed more than a service record. The names engraved behind the award belonged to men from a medical evacuation under fire. One of those men is here tonight." An older man rose near the back of the ballroom. He was thin, supported by a cane, Beside him stood his son, Peter Mercer. Daniel Mercer looked at me across the room. The ballroom disappeared behind rain. Blood. And the weight of a young soldier apologizing for being heavy. Daniel lifted one hand. "Doc," he said. That word broke the room open. He had driven from West Virginia with his son Peter, named for the man who died. Their letters and reunion photograph matched the compass, the evacuation. In my collection, Daniel did not prove the forgery, the records did. He proved the history was not a sales narrative but living memory. The charity chair offered me the microphone. I saw young veterans watching a private wound become public property. So I accepted. The medal is mine. I said, but the day behind it belongs to men who came home and men who did not. I kept it closed away because I did not know how to explain that being honored for one day does not make a man right every other day. I looked at Evan. I failed my son when I let silence become a wall. He failed himself when he decided that wound gave him ownership of other people. No one applauded yet. I was grateful. I asked the auction house to return the items after documentation and asked the charity not to cancel its grants. Donors had been deceived by two men, not by the veterans the program served. Then Daniel walked to the stage. He did not salute. We were old men, not actors in someone else's ceremony. He placed his hand over mine. "You told me in that ditch that staying alive was the only thank you wanted," he said. I stayed alive. The room applauded. I looked toward Evan. He was not watching me. He was watching Mara leave with her sister, carrying the ring in an envelope as evidence of a future she had chosen not to enter. That was the double truth he had never expected. The records proved he could not own my past, and Mara proved he could not own her future. The medals remained in secure storage for documentation. For 2 weeks, the cedar box stayed open, holding only the photograph and Ruth's cloth. The emptiness no longer felt like confusion. It felt like a boundary waiting to be rebuilt. Evan was formally charged several months later after the document examination, bank review, electronic records, and witness statements were complete. The charges were serious, but they were not the exaggerated punishment of a son for hurting his father. They concerned specific acts, property taken without consent, a forged transfer, attempted fraud, and unauthorized use of funds. Voss faced a separate investigation and was barred from future consignments. Pike surrendered his notary commission and cooperated without escaping consequences. The physician was referred to the state medical board. Procedure did not feel triumphant. It felt necessary. Mara recovered most of the unauthorized payment. She did not ask me to cover the rest. And I did not replace one controlling man with a generous one. She moved in with her sister, continued working, began counseling, and gave the prosecutor her own statement. The wedding never happened. Mara persuaded the vineyard to give the date to a hospital fundraiser for adaptive equipment. That was her idea. Evan called me from his attorney's office before his first hearing. His apology blamed debt, Voss, Vrief, in the shadow of my service. Each explanation held some truth. None transferred responsibility. He asked me to tell the prosecutor I wanted the matter handled inside the family. It stopped being inside the family when you created documents for strangers to use. I said. He began to cry. I loved him while listening. That may be the hardest truth in stories about betrayal. Love does not vanish on schedule when evidence arrives. It remains, stripped of its excuses, asking what shape it is allowed to take. I would not lie, pay his legal fees, or pressure Mara. If he accepted long-term counseling and responsibility, I would consider supervised visits after the case. You are choosing them over me. He said, I'm choosing the truth over the version of love that kept rescuing you from it. He ended the call. For 6 months, I heard nothing. Then a letter arrived without requests or complaints. Evan described the copied college proposal and admitted he had learned to perform remorse until consequences became negotiable. He did not ask forgiveness. I placed the letter in a new folder, separate from the cedar box. One honest letter did not restore trust. It gave trust one fact on which to start, The case ended with a negotiated plea after Evan accepted responsibility for the forged transfer and unauthorized transaction. He owed restitution and received probation, community service, financial counseling, and a suspended sentence. Some called it lenient. Others thought I should have prevented everything. Neither group had to be his father. My estate plan changed. Dana helped me appoint an independent successor trustee. Evan remained a conditional beneficiary. I revoked old authorizations, changed the locks, and reassigned healthcare decisions. I did not disinherit my son in anger. I removed the opportunities that had made love into leverage. Mara visited sometimes. At first, she sat close to the door. Later, she left her coat on a chair. She never became a replacement daughter. We were two people connected by an injury neither chose and by respect built afterward. Daniel and I resumed writing. His letters carried photographs of his garden and grandchildren. The life he had kept was the only monument I needed. When the auction house finally released my property, Celia delivered it herself. The silver star rested in an evidence sleeve. The medic's badge bore a new scratch. The bent compass still pointed north. After she left, I carried everything to the bookcase. The cedar box still bore the toy truck's scratch. I remembered a small boy racing along its lid while Ruth laughed. That memory was true. So was the man he became. Protecting myself required destroying neither fact. I returned the badge and compass, but loaned the silver star to the rehabilitation center. Its display named the team, the evacuated men, and Peter Rowe. Blank cards invited veterans to name someone who helped them come home. Within a month, the wall filled with names. That felt safer than a locked box and more honest than an auction catalog. Nearly a year after the gala, Evan asked to meet. His counselor proposed a structured session in a neutral office. Evan arrived early. He looked older, not transformed. Real change rarely announces itself through appearance. He apologized without explaining why I should accept. He named every act, including the theft, the copied signature, Mara's money, and the incapacity lie. Then he said, I wanted your medal to become money because money was something I thought I could surpass. I could not surpass what it meant. You were never required to, I answered. He cried. I did not embrace him. I agreed to another meeting in a month. No case. Unscheduled visits. Money. Or messages through Mara. Trust would be measured in conduct. Not intense regret. He accepted the terms. Maybe one day we will sit at my kitchen table without a counselor. Maybe we will not. Hope is not a promise owed to the person who caused harm. It is a door the injured person may choose to unlock after checking who stands outside. On the anniversary of Ruth's death, I made coffee before sunrise. I set out one mug. Her cream-colored cup remained on the shelf. The crack repaired with a thin line of food-safe gold by a local potter. Mara had told me about the old art of honoring a break without pretending it never happened. I used my own plain mug and carried it to the porch. The house was quiet. My keys rested in my pocket. The cedar box was closed, but it no longer held the part of my life that needed witnesses. At the rehabilitation center, names surrounded the medal. In West Virginia, Daniel was tending tomatoes. Somewhere across town, my son was learning that an apology is not a key. I had spent years believing a good father counted love by how often he rescued his child. I know better now. Sometimes love is the hand that reaches into danger. Sometimes it is the hand that releases control. And sometimes it is the steady hand that closes a door, keeps the key, and waits for truth to knock. If someone in your family broke trust and asked to return, what actions, not promises, would you need to see? Share your boundary in the comments. And subscribe for more stories about family, consequence, and the quiet courage it takes to protect dignity without surrendering love.